Ryan, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I know that you are working from home now because we are all kind of under quarantine because of the coronavirus here in the Bay Area and pretty much everywhere these days. So that's kind of a nice segue into what is it like for you now to work at home, given that you usually work in an office setting?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, working from home now, it's been a big shift. It's been last week was the first week where I was very seriously working from home. The week before as well a bit, and I told my colleagues like 2 weeks ago now about that. Oh, we probably won't see each other for a few months, and they laughed,
Mm,
and I did. No, no one's laughing anymore. So
hmm.
it's definitely one of those things where it's like it's crept up on us fast, extremely
Yeah.
fast. And I think people who were um, expected expecting this to happen, like I was expecting this to happen. I've been watching the data for months, really, ever since
Mm,
mid-January. And for those of us who were expecting it to happen, this just it went from nothing to so much faster than I ever thought would happen.
hmm.
And in hindsight, I guess it's not impossible. Like in hindsight, like, oh well, maybe could have predicted that, but I think the growth of the virus inside the U.S. has been a lot stronger than people expected, in part because I think we just expected the federal and civil institutions to do more to protect us.
Yes, that's for sure. You know, Ryan, you're overmodulating just a little bit. Maybe you could turn your input down or make it farther away. Cool.
There we go. So
That's better.
better.
Yeah,
Cool.
thanks.
So it's working from home has been interesting because it's been beneficial because I find in an open office that it can be very distracting in an open office,
Mm-hmm.
and my colleagues are just chatting, and it can be difficult even with headphones. Headphones don't solve it.
Hmm.
It's like there's visual distractions too,
Right. Yes.
and then if you know that it's there and happening, um, headphones don't make it not happen. It's still there, and it's like you want to get involved. You're like, oh, there's a cool conversation, or they're talking about something I might know something about. I just want to help or participate.
Right. So
Open.
even using tools like headphones, it's not really enough for you to really block your attention and keep it focused on the one thing in front of you.
Yeah, that's right. You really have to expend some effort to do so.
Right.
Um,
Because you know what's going on behind you, even if you can't see it.
that's
Yeah.
right. And headphone blocking isn't a perfect solution. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't block all the noise. And then also, like to drown out sound, like that's not good for your hearing.
Mm.
It just really isn't. You can't turn your headphones up indefinitely and listen to really loud music.
Yes.
And studies have shown that depending on the types of tasks you're doing, different types of audio input either improve or make that task worse. So
Mm.
certain types of creative thinking, I forget if they're impeded. And then there's also like musical choice has like a aspect to it.
Yes. I've heard that too. I've read that certain kinds of classical music are actually the best to focus to.
Right. So what I will do often at work is I can leave my desk and I have a laptop, and we have like cafes inside our office space. We have a big building. And one of the nice things about working for somewhere as large as Google is that, and being kind of neurodivergent, other than the fact that lots of other people are, is the office culture is not so personal that your inability to adhere to personal like interaction bits will be considered a slight, and people will get mad at you and punish you.
Mm.
You didn't say good morning, to the security guard, they don't care. You didn't, the receptionist, your colleagues, whatever, it's not, you're walking around wearing headphones and people are like, oh, that guy's just so weird wearing headphones all the time. So many people do it. And a lot of the people you see, you just don't really know who they are, and they don't have a bearing on like your work. And
Right. So if you go to a cafeteria, people are not likely to pester you by saying hello because you don't
right.
do that there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in my building, we have like a little seating space by a tea bar, very, very opulent. But yeah, I don't drink coffee, and actually I had to end up quitting tea as well. But I'll still go there and sit and drink like herbal tea, non-caffeinated tea. And
Mhm.
you know, like sometimes having a mild distraction you can't get into like, they're talking about something that you're not interested in, helps. It's like when people go to coffee shops, it's like that. It's exactly like that.
Yeah.
The only difference is that when I go to the bathroom, no one steals my stuff, which is really great. No one, like, go ahead, steal the laptop that belongs to the company, like, and you
That's
work
pretty
there too.
funny. Yeah. So
So
what you're saying is if you're at the cafeteria or the tea bar, you're not around your immediate coworkers. So whatever they're talking about, you probably don't even know what it is. So it's less distracting. You can filter that out better.
that's right. And then sometimes I do get involved and talk to other people, which is how I've made like friends and interests like in a broad parts of the company. And I've made friends that actually have sticked since they've left the company.
Hmm.
Friends who when they worked there were illustrators, and
Oh,
one would
fun.
just she would work in the cafe because she didn't feel comfortable working at her desk
Mm.
for reasons. And so we would work together and stuff. We'll work next to each other, kind of co-working,
Oh,
but we're
nice.
not working on anything related. And she's doing drawing and I'm doing what I do,
Mm-hmm.
programming type stuff. And I still keep up with them, actually. Even I was just texting them last night.
Nice.
So they're both illustrators, and one's like a tattoo artist, and they're just struggling, of course, just like many people are right now.
Right. So when you're working at home, does that mean it's easier for you to focus since there are not those distractions?
So it's easier and harder, actually.
Hmm.
Oftentimes it's easier because there aren't those distractions and I can focus, but sometimes you need to have like a diversity break, right?
Hmm.
Go for a walk, check things out. Last week I was on call, which required me to be very responsive, and I ended up sitting at my desk for 4 hours straight. I
Mm.
just don't do that at work because joining meetings is clicking buttons now. Back then it's you got to get up and walk somewhere, and just that
Hmm.
act of walking like does make a difference.
Yes, yes. But that's true for almost anybody. Everybody has a kind of a ballpark amount of time that varies from individual of how long they can focus at a time. And if you go past that, you're just spinning your wheels. But if you do something completely different, like walk or like even looking out the window, petting your cat, it will help you go back and refocus on the thing you were working on.
Yeah, one of the problems with here is at my office space, which is like an office lab kind of. I don't actually really roll with the whole man cave thing. I don't like it implies a certain kind of cultural terminology, like cultural context that I don't have here.
Hmm.
So like this is like closest to a lab, paperwork like crazy,
Mm-hmm.
electronic equipment stuff like. Well, actually, I keep the electronic equipment in the garage, but there's like lots of parts because I was doing research on building power systems for LED projects like
Mm.
last fall. So some of that detritus is still here, and then just in general, like I have a hard time organizing unless I'm at the top of my game,
Hmm.
and I usually reserve that for work, or do that at work.
Yeah.
So luckily, I have ever since getting both diagnosed and prescribed for ADHD, those reserves of focus and it's not even just focus, but like ability to like think has vastly improved. I'm like definitely like at a I assume what a normal person would be like now. Um,
Oh, cool. So what does
you
it
know,
mean to you to be at the top of your game?
well, like for example, when I'm feeling very tired, or previously when I was very tired, or just like kind of run out, like just when I look at a pile of stuff, I don't see an organizational method. I
Mm.
just like, okay, I can kind of see it, but like turning that into action and
Right.
visualizing what's going to happen, which is typically how I do stuff. I kind of visualize or think about what to do, and then I start doing it. It was
Mm-hmm.
just impossible. It's not. I just couldn't do it. It's like, okay, I could put that effort into like organizing back paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
I can find stuff because stuff's not unorganized. It's just like, okay, this pile is roughly about that date. That pile's about roughly that date. And then
Mm.
certain critical stuff, and this kind of gets into like, my organizational methods, but certain critical stuff is over here. Like, I don't, I've lost so many things over the time that, when I, put things away, I have to make sure that I put them away in a way that I can find them again.
Right.
That's
Can
really
you
important.
characterize what method that is for you?
When I lived in an apartment, it was a lot easier because it was a lot smaller. Now that I live in a house, it's a lot harder. And my um, oftentimes I could rely on memory, like, oh, I remember where I put that.
Mm.
So that helps. That went a long way. Eventually, you have to start classifying and categorizing things. Like, okay,
Right.
I can't put like papers or office work stuff with like tools, that's not going to work. I can't stash paperwork in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
or if I do, I have to have like the corner of the counter that is only for like stuff I got in the mail or paperwork that I need to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't just put stuff wherever to store it and think I'll find it again. And that's
Yes.
not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, have like kind of separation sections. So it's like, I don't put anything but clothes in my closet in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what people typically do. I mean, if you don't have space, you just got to do what you got to do. But
Mm-hmm.
if I did have to do that in the past, it'd be like, okay, I definitely need to have like a box for that here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is like things that I know that are going to be critically important, I'll like let pile up. So for example, tax bills are like not going to get filed away into, I have like piles of like to be filed, and then I have piles of probably going to need attention in the next 6 months.
Right. So kind of an
Now,
action area.
right. So
Yeah.
back when I tried to do getting things done,
Yes, the David Allen
yeah,
method.
I don't really do a lot with it anymore, but one of the few artifacts I have left of it is the label printer, which is
That's
what he.
exact same one I have.
Yep. And I just finally ran out of tape for it, right when I'm like, I need to organize stuff to be more workable here.
Mm-hmm.
But file folders is another thing I took from him. So my problem here is that, in the last 3 years of both moving and then having a kid, like I've not had the focus to like organize and file stuff.
Yeah.
Back before I moved, I would kind of like pile stuff up on my desk, and then eventually I would file it, and then I'd be like, oh wow, I haven't actually gone through this pile in like a year. It's like
Uh-huh.
the bottom stuff is a year old. It's like big utility bills from a year ago. And I also don't throw stuff away because I didn't trust my ability to like know what I'm not gonna need. Right? It's like I might need stuff. Unless I know I definitely won't need it. Now that I'm older and have done stuff, I find it's a little bit easier to be like, yeah, I'm not really not going to need this. I'm, whatever. I think a lot of this comes from my mom, who like kept a lot of stuff, not hoarder level stuff, but she was very organized,
Mm-hmm.
and she would like keep receipts and stuff. And so I kind of adopted some of that from her. But eventually, I've decided to like I've sort of streamlined that a little bit, but I still have like gas station receipts from like the early 2000s. By the way, gas was not as cheap in 2001 as you thought it was. It's still about $1.20 in Seattle area.
Interesting. You're talking mainly about paper right now, right?
Paper, absolutely.
Yes. But I'm wondering how much do you suffer from not having that paper organized? Like the stuff you found that was a year old, was that really a problem for you? Because I find people want to spend a lot of time organizing all the paper, but in reality, a lot of that stuff really just is not important.
It's recently did cause some issues because my wife has a 1Password account, and we can't find the backup password copy that's written down that we think is somewhere. I spend a lot of time looking for it. I do keep certain things organized. Like if I had 3 minutes to find my son's like birth certificate and other type of stuff, I can find it. I know where exactly it is.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've learned these hard lessons because, early on when I was, I had some kind of early lessons that were really difficult in college. I started to like miss things and like assignment dates. And that's when I took the paper, like every year they give out a paper organizer that's like half organizer and half advertisements. And, so I would rip out all the advertisements, and I'd have, a bi-week kind of thing where I can be like, okay, this is due, that is due. So that helped get me a little bit organized. I have really good memory, which helps. That basically, if I didn't have good memory, all my systems would be not even remotely enough. But since I have a fairly good memory, but that fell down when you were just juggling 5 classes of stuff.
Yes.
And so that was the first, kind of failure of lack of organization.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I graduated and I started working, I went through a stressful period of work, and I just kind of let bills pile up, and I didn't pay them for too long, and things became overdue and stuff. So that's when I kind of started doing some of the David Allen stuff not long after, and I did a kind of like a, you got to do things now kind of thing.
Mm.
Now that I'm a bit older, the bills and stuff that come in on a regular basis are, there's like a pattern to them, and I've kind of learned that pattern. So it's like, every month by mid-month, I need to start paying some bills, and there's like 3 or 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And, nowadays it's so much easier than it used to be because, if you don't know what your PGE, if you lost your PG&E bill, and I have, you can look it up online and see how much you owe.
Right. Yeah.
That was, back in the day, that was like that was impossible.
I know. You'd have to call them and hope that you could get through to somebody. Right.
Ugh. And like calling someone, like, no thanks.
Not your comfort level.
Not really. Back when I was, I would have my wife call for me to do certain things that I just had a huge anxiety around, like calling for a dentist, calling for a doctor's appointment, stuff I just couldn't seem to do. And then she doesn't always love calling on the phone now, so now we kind of have a little back and forth, like, okay, I don't want to call, you don't want to call, who's gonna lose and have to make the phone call. Luckily, so much less requires calling people nowadays, and
yeah, just book online, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or you can find information without talking to someone. And this has really saved me because it's like online billing, online banking really helps a lot, because it's like, we will get electronic bills and we'll remind you when you need to pay them.
Yes, I
It's
love
like,
that.
and we'll even tell you how much to pay, and you just, if you're willing to just pay it, you can go forth.
Yeah.
And still,
right.
so that helps. Those sort of modern things actually help a ton.
Yes.
Google Notices, I don't know what to call it, but if you have like the app installed, or Assistant or whatever on your phone, it'll be like for example, my mom will send, this is the I've definitely not picked people up from the airport, and that's not good. But now everyone who I have to pick from the airport, which is mostly my mom or my mother-in-law, they have to forward me their itinerary. Then Google will suck that up and create a calendar invite, and then they will tell you that your flight was delayed.
Wow.
Or they will tell you, hey, you gotta go to the airport now. And it's so reliable. I just rely on that. Like,
that's impressive. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's really good. People kind of, they're just taking a look at your email, like what you're getting ambiently, and being like, let's do something helpful for you. And I'm like, yes, this is very helpful for me.
Yeah.
That help. And I live only 15 minutes from the airport, so like, a last minute notification for when the flight's going to land actually totally works.
Yes, that's good.
So you can just get, if I leave home when their flight touches down and they can start using their cell phones, like, that's the perfect time to pick them up.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the divergent thinking thing that you mentioned. So when you look at paper or your office, how do you feel that the divergent thinking affects that? Because my impression of that is that you almost immediately have maybe 17 ideas about what you could do with this piece of paper, and you have to struggle to focus in and choose one thing to do. Or some people just don't even do that. They get overwhelmed and do nothing because there are too many options.
Definitely with this whole paper thing, like, for a long time was overwhelming. It's just like, okay, I can't. And I think I know what to do, but like sitting through and doing it, oof, that's gonna be tough. I'm not like, I just can't. I can't do that. So, and then moving past that, it's like, okay, what do I even do? I don't know. Lately, it's gotten a bit better with the meds, so now I have some ideas and stuff. But one of the ways is that, this is not just like a pile of paper.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is like a clip for a tarp. So like, if your tarp grommet gets ripped out, you can like repair it, and still, like, this is like Burning Man related stuff. And then it's like, part of the thing is that the organization means that, like, stuff I can't figure out where to organize or what to do with just kind of piles up there. And then the areas that should be organized, like my closet, are pretty fairly unorganized. And my workspace where I like build stuff in the garage is like also fairly unorganized, because it's hard to think of organizational methods. Like, how do I do stuff with this? It's gotten a bit easier lately because I've been doing a lot of like, okay, maybe I can build stuff to like organize stuff. And then thinking about organization has gotten easier. Part of the thing is, like, to organize, you have to put things in categories that you will think about later.
Yes.
It's really just that simple.
Right.
Or that complicated, really.
You did say that there's just clothes in your closet, though, but you still think it's not organized?
And the clothes are just kind of like not very well organized.
But at least they're all clothes.
Yes. There's a couple other mild things in there, like old glasses in a area. But in general, things that aren't clothes is fairly, and then the clothes aren't unorganized as per se. Like some things are hanging up.
Right.
Things I don't wear very often are kind of crumpled on the ground. Things that are gonna wear sooner, I still wear, are like kind of folded or put on the shelf.
More
And then I
accessible.
have like more accessible, and I have like a box for socks and stuff like that. So it's not like, it's not totally insane. It's
right.
also just like, when I see pictures of people's houses that are just neat and tidy, I'm just like, even before we had a kid, I'm like, how do you do that? Like, I have so much stuff, and
Yeah.
it's not like I bought all this stuff frivolously, and it's part of it is just like, I mean, one of our challenges is, and now with the kid a bit, but we've sort of partially solved it. We just have so many books.
Mm.
And I read this thing. It's the Japanese. It was this cool stories about like the Japanese art about like buying books to like read them, but then you don't read them. Like, you're not buying to build a collection. You're buying to essentially read them, but then you just have too many books. That is me to a T. I have all these books I want to read, and then for attention and other reasons, I just never got to reading them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to get rid of them.
Right.
Like, getting rid of books feels very hard to me. Throwing them out is like impossible.
Oh yeah, nobody can do that. No.
Like, recycling or trashing books. Like, you mean murdering someone? No, I would never do that. Like,
I know.
No way.
Yes. Yeah. But in terms of categorizing, it's interesting because sometimes people they feel like they have to over categorize, like they have to have 500 categories and fit each thing into one of those. And really, my mantra has always been the fewer, the better. You only need to organize things to make it easier for you to find things and live on a day-to-day basis. But if you make it too organized, and there is such a thing, if it's too organized, you can't keep up with maintaining it. So everybody has to find that little set point where it's organized enough. I can maintain this. I've got the flu. The kid is also sick, but it's kind of working, and that's good enough.
Yeah, I actually took me many years to get to a similar position, and to that understanding that, like, over organization doesn't work. The cabinet where all the medicines are, that can be good enough.
Yes.
The medicines are still in the luggage you haven't unpacked. That's not good.
No.
But we have to have a spot for everything to be. May not. They're diminishing returns.
Yes, exactly.
And I think I'm better than I used to be here. When it came to email back in the day, back before Gmail came on the scene, I can really say that. But I actually struggled with, like, how do I categorize my email? And I fell into this perfectly, where it's like, I need to have 500 slots for everything. Oh, this falls into more than one slot. Now what? And it was hard.
Right.
And I never solved it. Eventually, search got better, and you could search email so quickly. And then now it's just, my strategy now with email is like, exactly what you described. Have a few broad categories, right? Everything you did work on this team, automatic emails from automatic systems, because that's kind of the world I work in.
Yeah.
And then labels for that, and then search within those.
Yes.
Rely on your memory. Oh, that person, that time, or that date sent me stuff.
Yeah.
And then sometimes letting go, like, I just can't find it, and it's going to have to be okay.
Yes. Yes. You don't have to control everything.
And then, in terms of real world stuff, this can cause over purchasing of things, like, oh, well, I can't find this, but I need it, so I'm going to get another one.
That's classic.
It's like, well, now I have too many glue sticks.
Yeah. But those kind of things can be triggers for you to realize, okay, I do need a slightly finer level of organization in my office supplies, because I'm ending up buying those again and again.
Yes. And I'm trying to kind of slowly get there. Time, of course, is like a thing, but I'm spending a lot more time at home, so our house has been getting a little bit more organized.
Yeah. And organizing when you need to be organized. I worked years ago with a guy who was very embarrassed to open this desk drawer. He worked at home. He was a photographer. He opened this drawer, and it's jammed with receipts. They're all just kind of in there willy-nilly. And I said, what is that? And he said, well, these are the receipts that I used to do my tax returns. And I said, oh, are they all in there? And he said, yes. Is anything else in there? No. we're fine. Close that drawer. When he comes time for him to do his taxes, he just empties the drawer on the floor and goes through them, and he does his taxes. I mean, there was no point in him kind of try to categorize them up front because they were all there. So it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be beautiful. It doesn't have to suit anyone else, but your organizing system needs to work for you.
Yeah, I think my wife had said recently, like, oh, how about, or someone else was like, oh, well, why don't you have someone help you or do your organization of your whatever, like your office or something. And I'm just like, you mean what? Then I can never find stuff again. I mean, obviously, I think you that's you do that work, so that's not how you do things then, right?
It is not. No, it's a process of inquiry, asking, what are these things? Oh, how come you have that clip on your desk? Maybe that goes somewhere else. I really ask more questions so that the client, him or herself, says, oh, yes, we use this for this. Oh, yes, this is here because this.
And then you lead them through it so that they form
Yes.
their own memories of where stuff has gone as well. That's
And use
important for
their
me.
own personal logic to figure out where they should put something.
Yes, that's important because the
Yeah.
other day I was looking for like a blood oxygen, and I knew I didn't have to look everywhere, a blood oxygen meter, because I was like, it's health. Everyone's now worried about health stuff. So, but we had bought one for totally unrelated reasons, and I'm just like, where is it? And I was just sort of thinking back where things were, and I actually did eventually find it because I had a box of stuff that was actually we should really go through. But when we changed the fridge, we took everything off the fridge, the top and the sides, and everything out of the baby's what do you call it, pack and play crib thing, which we've now packed away because he's too big for it. And it's like, that went into a box, and that box has went a little bit out of sight, out of mind, and so everything in it was temporarily lost. But then I found it after just half a day of haphazardly searching now and again, and luckily it's like, okay, there it is. Okay, well, yeah, so it wasn't in oddball places, right? Like,
but it was packed away with other stuff that needed to be packed at a certain time, or
yes, it was time and space located, but like, it's when things get really, when you do things that are just like, and I think it's really important to do this, is not put things in like places that seem convenient now but then are easy to forget, like, oh, I have a drawer full of candles, and I do, and then also we'll put the blood oxygen meter in there. No, don't do that. Like, leave it on your counter until you can find a better place, which is what I typically do, which means my house is way more disorganized than other people's.
Because things are out waiting to be categorized?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot better in the last year, and sort of like pushed the disorganization to the edges, and now the worst places are like in this room I actually sit in, and then work all day long, which makes it not super hard to do work, but it's all like, oh, I really
yeah,
I need more space or something. And then just like making sure like you are putting like things with like a drawer full of candles. Okay, how about lighters go in there? Matches,
yeah,
maybe flashlights.
right.
That's about it.
Yes. So when you look at something like that clip that you showed me before, what kind of goes through your mind? Why does it not seem easy to figure out a place to put it?
Yeah, where would I put it? I don't really, I guess I have a giant bin of like random Burning Man stuff that I probably should put in. I could like go and find, but it's like, because it's semi-storage, it's not like I can just reach over there. And I think that sort of drove that a lot. And then also my desk has been so cluttered for so long that it was underneath other stuff. So.
Right. Yes.
Out of sight,
there
out
are
of
many
mind.
reasons. It's true. Yeah, I know many people who have ADHD like to keep things out because they feel they'll be reminded of them again, but that only works when there's one layer of stuff.
Yeah, one challenge I have here is I have these IKEA desks. They don't have drawers, so I see calculators over there. I'm going to eventually need them. Now what?
Yeah.
I mean, a calculator box? No, that doesn't make sense. Like, so they just sort of stay out for a bit. So now all of a sudden my organization problem has become one of not where the calculator goes. It's where does the calculator go? Where does that little weird tarp clip goes? Where does these rechargeable, and then all of a sudden it's now become, not a monster, like, a 25-headed monster. So you're
Right.
like, I can't deal with this now. And in part, if you only have 5 minutes, you can't deal with it right now. It's going to take more than 5 minutes to undo.
Mm.
And iterative chopping off at it will still take like half an hour. I've kept a bunch of Amazon boxes because I'm just like, I'm going to have to organize stuff. Boxes are a way. And then labels. David Allen did say something about, a printed label is really important for organizing. And I totally believe it. It's like,
yes.
He's like, I've done handwritten notes. I've done the printed labels. The printed ones, you're going to have to take me by my word for this. It sounds crazy, but it really is important. And I totally agree with him. Yeah, like instead of handwriting a little, like this goes here, like on a file tab, he's like, print it out. So
I don't remember that he said that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a big component of it. And like of my partially filed stuff, they'll have little printed labels on them. Here's something this is the last thing I was able to print. It says memory cards and cable adapters.
Yes.
So that was the last before I ran out of the tape. I'm getting more on Friday, so it's cool.
Good.
Luckily Amazon is still working. But what he said is like, when it comes to filing stuff away, just use manila folders in like a banker box, which is what I did for a long time.
Yeah.
And he's like, just put stuff alphabetically and just name stuff that kind of makes sense that you'll remember later. Just that simple. Like, don't overthink it. Taxes, 2018.
Yes, that's plenty. Yeah.
IRS, Social Security cards, power bills, and it's enough. It's just that when you have enough to do, it's like, okay, I don't have time to do it right now.
Right. So that kind of gets into the topic of prioritizing, which I also wanted to talk about, prioritizing and time management. So everybody has too much to do. That's just the fact of life. It probably has been for a very long time. We think that's a new thing, but it's really not.
Yeah.
So you're always, and when you work at home, that gets exacerbated. But, minute by minute, you are deciding to spend your time in a certain way. And how do you know that that's the best way? And this is not a trick question. I'm wondering how you think of this.
I'm bad at this. I've been extremely bad at this, and it's caused like relationship issue level stuff. Luckily for the current relationship, it's caused issues that were surmounted, and then we made a kid together. So we found a way to work with and work around it. In my case, one of the things I have is hyper focus, which sounds cool. Right, you were talking about people can focus on stuff until diminishing returns. What's the average time for like a quote so-called normal person? Hour, 2?
Oh, I don't even think it's that long, really.
Yeah. So how about like
20 minutes?
Yeah. How about working on a single thing obsessively for 7 hours straight?
That's pretty hyper. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. That can happen a lot. But here's the thing: is that it sounds good, but you then get in a place where it's like, I taught myself how to build and design printed circuit boards. That's not my field, not even close. And it's like, I did that by staying up to 3, 4 a.m. multiple nights and then going to work the next day. Luckily, nothing really fell apart. I was able to sort of manage it mostly. But like, when you're doing that hyper focus, like not even sleep or food or interruptions can really, like jostle you. Yeah. And then the problem is, the other problem is, what do you call it? Interruptions can be like almost painful. Not pain, but very discomfortable. Like can make you mad and angry and pissed. Many, many times in these text messenger, I guess luckily lost to the wind, could be, with Julie, my girlfriend at the time, it was like, oh, when are you coming home? I'm like, oh, I'm just, I'm finished something up. This is like 5:30. Okay, well, are you going to leave soon? Yeah, I'm going to leave in 10 minutes. And then I get home at like 7:38, because I was so focused on something and I was like, I can leave any moment now. I really could. Yeah. And then I didn't. And then she's mad. I was recently looking for watch for like through my stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is the watch I got because I thought that the problem with me not coming home on time was that I didn't know what time it was. That's not the problem.
Mm.
And so it's actually caused me to be in a place where it's like I don't want to get into that flow hyper focus state all the time at work, especially later in the day, and that can actually be a little negative on the work, because it's like those times are productive. Like if you like one of those hyper focus sessions on something work related will bust through like a week or two of work in like a day. You can like
Huh.
achieve a level of productivity and focus and stuff that like your coworkers are just like, again, be actually it could cause a problem, because people are like, well, luckily around here for the most part people are kind of expanded oriented when it comes to work. They're not like, you did too much work and now I'm mad at you. um
Mm-hmm.
but it could cause that kind of problem. It's like, oh, I did our entire week's worth of stuff tonight.
Yeah.
And you won't love that.
Are you able to then initiate these hyper-focus sessions voluntarily? You don't just get sucked into them involuntarily?
Um, I can manage it to some extent. Not getting in, like, you can avoid getting into it. Getting into it can be a little tricky sometimes, especially if you're very distractible and like, oh, other shiny thing.
Mm.
And then the other thing is that you just can't hyper focus on whatever you want to all the time. You have to have some kind of like interest in it,
Yes.
or maybe sometimes like certain types of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like,
Mm.
can't do taxes until I do it all in one day on the last day.
Mm.
Um, and in terms of like deadlines, external deadlines can help. This is not always a fun way to do things, because it's always better to do stuff early so you have more time.
Right.
And it's, it, on one hand, it's like not the best. On the other hand, it's sort of like given me my entire career, because it's like the top things for learning is focus and attention.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not
Right.
focused and attention, you're not going to learn really. And then
Yeah. So you
other
mentioned
stuff.
some workarounds that you use with your wife. Can you talk about those?
So right now it's a lot easier with a kid, because I really have to be home by a certain time. Other things I do at work or around work are triggering activities together. So like, for example, we have a daily meeting at like 11:20, and then we go out for lunch right after, or go to
Mm-hmm.
lunch right after. So I eat on time every day, because we as a team have built this thing.
Mm.
At home, it's a little hard. My eating on time right now is a little not the easiest. Luckily, she wants to eat on time, so that helps me. She's like, "Do you want something to eat?" I'm like, "Yes, please. I'll come and do
Yes.
that." And then like making sure that you schedule. This is kind of like what good ritual and routine is for us, to schedule either breaks or schedule ways to, like, you do this thing, then you do the other thing. Like I like to take Bart with my coworker, so I go home on time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the other thing is like making sure that you do your hyper focus stuff at like get into those things at times that are going to be okay.
Right. That's what I meant about, can you schedule them? Right.
Yeah, I can more or less schedule them. One of the
Yeah.
things that's helped is that you know um, like should you come to bed at 2 a.m.? Yes. Should you come to bed at 11 p.m.? Probably, but like in your own personal space and stuff, taking off some of those constraints, and finding a way to like get through that, because those hyper focus times, although they can be kind of inconvenient, like they really expand and are very rewarding, so I don't want to like get rid of them.
Right.
And they also contribute to my plethora of interests and hobbies. It's like,
Right.
yeah, like for example, I from a technical level, I'm like an excellent technical photographer,
Mm.
like lighting stuff, just figuring out all those numbers and stuff that people want to know. But I eventually got to this point where I realized I'm just not really good at composition, and I have a hard
Mm.
time taking pictures of people, and all my pictures are of landscapes, which are like, you know, you can run out of landscapes, you really can. Um, so I just stopped taking photos, because I'm just like, this is not really, I'm not, not making great stuff anymore. So
Mm.
if I ever really did, and people really want to see pictures of people, so I'm done here. So
Mm.
I can take great photos, and I even have some stuff to do it, but I just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I kind of like cycle through like hobbies and interests, and it's funny, because they're I think like a hobby is something you do to keep from being bored. Is that the right way to describe that?
Hobby does have a bad connotation, I think. It makes it sound frivolous to me. I don't.
Right. I mean, like, I was like, I really want to build this this power circuit board for a LED lighting art thing,
Mm-hmm.
the one that you've seen. And it's like, so I'm like, is that a hobby? I'm trying to build something. And
Mm-hmm.
then this term, although now everything's on hold because of coronavirus, I'm like, you know what? Last fall I was like, you know what? I taught myself this stuff in a couple of weeks. I bet I could teach it to high schoolers.
Uh-huh.
And then so I did. So I've been
Cool.
teaching, high schoolers at the Code Next program in Oakland how to build circuit boards and do the soldering of these tiny little surface components. And
Nice.
so it's like, so a hobby, interest, contribution to the world, where do these things overlap?
Well,
This,
I personally don't think there's anything wrong with spending your time doing things that just plain make you happy for whatever reason they make you happy. I don't think they have to contribute to the world.
yeah, lately my kind of little mini hobby has been like weeding the garden and planting new
Mm-hmm.
plants, and just like I can't go, to the park or go to, hang out with people. So I guess I'll just like, improve the home front a bit.
And
And
it's enjoyable. Yeah.
it is, and it's also like a nice focus break. It's like I can not read about, the horrible goings-ons of the world, like
Yeah.
somehow even worse than it's ever been. And, I can just, you know, do this. And,
And it's a break from work as well.
it's a break from work. It's a break. It's also like physical activity and motion, which is really nice.
Yes, if your job is not physical, it's really important to do physical stuff. I totally
Right.
agree. Yeah.
And
And I
then
like
it's,
what you were saying earlier about how your time seems to often get structured by external things that some of which it seems like you have put into place yourself.
yes,
You're relying on
absolutely.
but you put it into place. That's really great. That's really some people sometimes they think they have to invent all of it themselves and keep it together themselves, but there's lots of things that you can just hook onto, like, oh, you're going home on BART? I'm going to join you every day. Why
Yep.
not?
The push to get our status meetings done right before lunch, was pretty easy to do. Everyone else was into it, but now it's it's a thing I pushed for, but also everyone, it came together in a way that I didn't have to fully maintain.
Yeah.
I still don't.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of things. Having a kid obviously drives a lot of stuff. That's how come I have dinner at the same time every day, because if we
Yeah.
don't, he doesn't say I'm hungry. He gets extremely upset and angry, and he doesn't even know that he's hungry.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
we need to teach you how to know you're hungry, and then let's feed you first.
Yes.
So that's a great external, like, time triggering is like this event time triggering is really important, because I do I do get lost in time, and what's the most important and right thing to do is hard to know. And I've actually had minor failures at work early on, not scheduling, not prioritizing stuff correctly. And
Mm.
then, one thing I do a lot is when I respond to like emergencies at work or incidents or whatever, one thing I can do is over focus on a thing that might not be fruitful.
Mm.
Right? If you're trying to solve a problem in an urgent fashion, you want to be working on the right thing. So therefore, you have to check yourself. Is this the most important thing? What's the context we're doing this in?
Mm-hmm.
What's important for now? I need to like, and I do like just check myself explicitly. Like, okay, we've been working on this for a little while. Am I doing the right thing or not?
Right.
Is this fruitful? Is this going to lead to a conclusion? Even if what I solve a small, like, there's a big outage or a big problem. If I just solve this tiny little slice of an
Mm-hmm.
issue, that's not enough, right?
Mm.
I need to solve the whole thing, not the small thing. So
Yeah. And
time
so
stuff,
divergent thinking can be a hindrance in that?
the
Or is
focus
it the
stuff,
hyper focus?
the hyper focus is
Right.
what there. But like, one of the things is like, that the divergent thinking stuff helps in a lot of ways, because a lot of my conclusion of how a lot of people think is that people often are very social and look towards social stuff as forms of approval, right?
Mm.
So it's like, am I working on the right thing or not? I'll know it when everyone else thinks I am.
Mm.
And that's not true when you're working on technical or other things. We even saw a widespread failure in the US government recently on this. That's sort of the definition of the coronavirus thing. It's like, what's the most important thing to work on from like the executive level? Well, it wasn't anything they were working on in the last 2 months. It's like, what should or could have, our executive of the country been working on. Well, we should have been working on tests, I guess. So when you index what you should be working on based on what other people think you should be working on, you're adopting what their values or priorities are. And if you are working with something that doesn't care about that,
yeah,
that's a big problem. Now, if you're in a PR field or an area that's highly social, it does make it,
mm-hmm.
But once you start working in computers or technology or science or whatever, like viral spread doesn't matter what people think about it.
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
this process that just happens whether you want it to or not. And same thing with
Yeah.
technology. It's like, if everyone thinks, this should be working, but it's still not, it doesn't really matter that experts think it should be working, because it's not.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an area where it actually really exceeds. I definitely can solve problems at work that other people struggle with, because it's like, well, this should work. And I'm like, well, the evidence suggests that it isn't working. So therefore, no matter how much you think it works and you look at it that it should works, we need to dig deeper and find out why it isn't.
Right. So when you start digging, does that where the divergence comes in? You look at all these possibilities of things that could be going wrong, and then start converging after that?
Two areas where, so one thing that that helps me is that I have like this internal, like, not drive. It's like why do people want to know the truth of things? Do you want to know it so you can, tell someone else you were right, or like, who knows, right? There's all sorts of reasons. I want to just know things because I do, right? Like, how do things work? I'm interested in that. Why?
Yeah.
I just am. There's no reason for it. So just repeating that process means that you've built up this knowledge base of stuff, right? Like, from a certain level, does the average person need to know how, like, the coronavirus works, like how it actually works? Not really. But now when we're saying, okay, what should I do if I go to the grocery store? Like, once you understand, now you need to know how stuff works. And you see this in my field, my work as well, where it's like, people are like, how did you know that? I'm like, well, I just kind of learned that a while back, and it was just dormant information, but now it's come into usefulness. And just having that drive to understand how things work means that when you have to rapidly figure stuff out, you already have a built-in knowledge base. And then systemizing and kind of figuring it out. Like, I'm not trying to learn patterns. I'm trying to figure out how it works. And just having, and then the other thing is, like, with the focus and the hyper focus and the distractibility, you can get both an attention to detail as well as, like, hop around. So it's like, if you can hop around your focused attention to detail, this can actually be very beneficial, because it's like, any number of avenues, because, these technical problems are usually never obvious, right? If they were obvious, they wouldn't have happened. That's the definition of it. Like, you can see this in, like, there's great documentaries about, like, modern disasters, and they're always a chain of 3 or 4 things that went wrong, that if any one of them had gone slightly differently, people wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's always multiple tiny little, you gotta dive deep on each little thing, but it's usually, you can't just do one thing. You got to do a couple different ones.
Right. And the other way of thinking would be to, if you're maybe more of a convergent thinker, you would have some assumptions already. Okay, it's usually this. We're going to look here. I think it's probably this, and we're going to just work on this part because that is the logical thing to do, and it makes sense, and it's happened before. Whereas somebody like you might be saying, oh, I'm going to actually look way over there because nobody's looked there. And then I'm going to look here, 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 and I'm going to find it.
Well, people often rely on abstractions.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh yes, this is how this should work. It always works this way.
Yeah.
Until, of course, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, like, relying on abstractions, assuming things, or having to work top down. And oftentimes you have to work top down when you don't have a command of the field with a lot of in-depth knowledge. And a lot of times I can solve or look for problems because it's like, well, something's happening up here, but I know it needs to really, through the layers of computer stuff or whatever, if we're not doing this down here, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's how, anyone who solves technical problems is like, my car doesn't start. It's like, well, if the spark plugs don't work, it's not going to work, right? It's like, we don't need to top down it. You've already built up that model or a partial model, right? Because a lot of computer systems, even as they're different, they're also the same.
Yeah.
Right? Like, my computer CPU and yours are very similar. They're almost identical. They're probably made by the same company, Intel, right? So it's like tracking these similarities, being concrete about things, not relying on abstractions, having a pre-built depth knowledge base with focused depth. And then maybe not trusting other people or trusting what people say.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it sounds bad, but it's like people will say, and I've done customer support type stuff for technical stuff, and people say, oh, X, I believe X is something. I'm like, we got to double check that, because let me tell you this much, if it's not true, and it's like, I can't access the system. Well, did you add them to the access list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, well, of course I did. And it's like, 10% of the time they didn't.
Mm.
And it takes seconds to check.
Yeah.
You're going to save yourself a ton of time,
Yeah.
aggregately and individually.
Yeah.
And it's not even a matter, like, it's a matter of like, people just, everyone makes mistakes. And it's like, you've come to me to double check all your work. So let's double check all your work and check the easiest things first.
Mm-hmm.
And then move on from there. And
Yeah.
it can seem insulting because people are like, what do you think, I'm an idiot? And it's like, individually, no. Aggregately, the numbers are not in your favor. And I've done telephone technical support for internet stuff, and it's
yeah.
I mean, I remember once on a call where I was having a hard time with a person, and it turned out she was not putting the floppy disk in the correct direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, how do you explain to someone the correct direction to put that in? Because you just don't normally have to explain it.
Yes, exactly. So the really basic stuff. Yeah. That's
Right.
interesting that you say that, because I feel like a lot of what I do with my clients involves asking what I do consider to be stupid questions, like, what is this thing and why do you even have it? I mean, for them, they'll say, well, it's self-evident, right? It's a this and such. But then when I ask more questions, they realize, well, actually, my mom gave it to me a long time ago, and it just is now part of my life. I don't think I can get rid of it. Okay, now we know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think things that are either self-evident, this is how abstraction happens, right? People have filed it underneath this layer of
Yeah.
abstraction.
Yes.
And
And
it's like,
they take it for granted. Yeah.
right. And part of my, neurodivergence is like, I prefer or want to think in concrete ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, when people be like, oh, this is how the computer system works. This system talks to that system.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, well, I understand things in a concrete way. And if that was really true, that would imply we'd have to copy all this data. That would be like overwhelm the network. So are we going to have a problem here or not?
Yeah.
Right.
So we should kind of wrap up here, but if I feel like you're getting to a point where you're telling me what the really good, important, valuable skills you have that are actually a result of your divergent thinking. Could you be more specific about that to wrap up with?
Absolutely. They're part of them. So there's two aspects. One is stuff that's just intrinsic. Like, I can't teach someone to care about why things work. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, no one taught me it. I just did. Now I can show you how things work, and hopefully you find that exciting. And then you're like, yeah, I want to learn more. And then I'm like, that's great. Let's learn more. But I can't teach someone like how to care about why things work. Stuff that, I like that. So that's one aspect, is like, there's some kind of intrinsic parts, and maybe we can unlock it. I'm not saying that it's not teachable. It's like, I haven't figured out how to teach it. And then, maybe inspiration will work for people. And the other one is just like amalgamated, like, ways of thinking that, I think other people could adopt, is like, think concretely. How do things actually work? What are the implications of this? People, like, step by step through stuff. My mom was asking me, should I go out on this thing? And I'm just like, let's step through the different consequences of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, I came up with a phrase at that point. I'm like, she's like, oh, well, risk. I'm like, well, risk without benefit is just risk. So then you don't do it, right? You have to have a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it's just risk, right? This is, so it's, so there's some thinking patterns there, doing things like stopping yourself and checking in, like, okay, am I working on the right thing?
Yes.
Like, I can take a break and think about what I'm doing every now and again.
Mm-hmm.
I very rarely found there's an emergency that if you don't act within seconds, it'll be a huge problem. You can always take 10 seconds to think.
Yes.
And if you can't take 10 seconds to think, the bad thing that would happen is going to happen anyways. And
Yeah.
you can't stop it. And I think this is what they teach the EMT people as well. Because then the consequences of your hurried action might be even worse. for yourself or the
Yeah.
patient or whatever it might be.
Right.
So always taking just a little bit of extra time to double think, not just super rushing into it. That's sort of like emergency response stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, how do I think about things? If other people, if everyone agrees on something, chances are it's probably it might be true, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the sky is blue. Like everyone agrees on that. So that's probably okay. Of course, if you're, some kind of colorblind, the definition of blue might change, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
questioning those assumptions and making sure that you know what they are. And there's tons of them.
Yes. That's
And
a
you
great way to phrase it, questioning those assumptions. Yeah. And even
and
realizing that they are being made.
yeah, the hard part is learning about what those assumptions might be.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way is to like look into the details, because ultimately in the end, when we talk about big things, the details matter.
Yeah.
Right? Like when we look at our current thing, how big is the coronavirus? I don't know. It's tiny. It's extremely small. It is the most detailed thing ever. It is like, you cannot see it without like an electron microscope or something.
Yeah.
That's a detail. It matters.
Yeah.
Details often matters. Sometimes many details don't.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got to determine what's the difference between details that do and don't matter. And that's where building up expertise is. And you
Yes.
can't just know, you have to build that expertise over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, staying curious, figuring stuff out. And these things build up into like a knowledge base that then becomes quite formidable.
Mm-hmm.
Where people are like, all of a sudden, what do I do? What do I do? And I'm like, I know how to, respond to this current emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And not over respond either. And that's something I feel like I'm very proud
Yeah.
of, is that we did not over respond. We did not buy the 25 carts of toilet paper that apparently everyone is. And,
Yeah.
our house is not overflowing with a ridiculous amount of food and stuff.
Yeah.
But we still feel like prepared for this circumstance. And,
Yeah.
building that expertise and checking the evidence, right? What's the evidence that this is happening? Like,
Yeah.
not proof, like, let's see some evidence of that it's going to be happening, stuff that we can
Yeah.
all verify.
Yeah. That's great. I like the way that you kind of folded it back into our current event situation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on my show. This has been really fun. And I hope that anybody who listens to it will realize that if they feel at sea a little bit at work or at home being a divergent thinker, there are definitely benefits to being that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like my success in my career has been both hindered and benefited by this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't hyper focus on my interest in computers back in the day, would I even have this career? What would I be doing? I don't know.
Right. And you've managed to make some workarounds that are really helping you a lot. So that's
Yeah, and workarounds don't have to be 100%.
no,
That's a
no.
very important thing, and I think
Yeah.
that's something that especially younger people, may not realize for a while, and we can help them with this, is that they just have to work enough, and enough can be okay.
Yes. Yes. Great. Okay, that's a great note to end on. Thanks again.
Thanks.